Hey, welcome. I'm Stories After Midnight, and I hope you enjoy the next few stories I'm going to read to you. If you do, let me know in the comments or leave a like. Either way, I hope you enjoy, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. Have you ever been in love? Like, honestly and truly in love? Do you know the ache of wanting to hold them and kiss them, but never being able to? It makes it even worse when they're so painfully close, but so far away. You see, I've lived in the same apartment since I was 7 years old. Neither of my parents really wanted me, and when they got a divorce, my mom refused to take custody of me. I can't really blame her. She gave birth to me when she was only 13, so she never before had a chance to be young. I can, however, blame her for leaving me with a monster. Horror movies never scared me. I never feared the boogeyman or Pennywise the dancing clown. I knew none of those monsters were real because I lived with a real one. To all his co-workers, he was charming, intelligent, and an absolute joy to be around. My father never drank unless he was offered something while out with friends. He didn't do drugs either. Didn't need any of that to fuel his rage and hate for me, and everything else he interacted with. Dad never yelled at me. He didn't need to raise his voice to make me afraid. He did beat me, controlled when and where I was allowed to eat, sleep, play, and even use the bathroom. There was a huge list of rules for the house. One of the biggest ones was, if he had company over, I was to stay in my room and not make a single sound or come out until he called for me. When he called me, I was to help him clean up. Do you know how hard it is to get blood and vomit out of your favorite dress? The only thing that kept me sane was the boy that lived in my vents. Well, he says that's not where he lives, but I can only ever talk to him through the vent. Well, he says that's not where he lives, but I can only ever talk to him through them. Anytime I was scared or sad or hurting or just lonely, he'd be there to talk to me and comfort me. I never told Dad about the boy in the vents. I was afraid if I told him that Dad would take him away from me. He always took away the things that made me happy. The boy never told me his name, says he doesn't have one. I started calling him V, and he seemed to like that. V and I would talk for hours on end. We'd laugh and cry and play pretend. V was the only friend I had ever had. He didn't like Dad. Didn't like the way he treated me. Over the years, V and I became very close, and things started to change. Sometimes I'd come home from school to find presents like beautiful necklaces or CDs I'd talked about wanting. Sometimes he'd fix things of mine that were broken. Our talks were more sporadic, though, as Dad became more and more attached to me. Demanding I sleep in the bed with him, he would do things to me. Awful things. Honestly, I preferred him just beating me. I didn't want him to touch me. Didn't want to feel his rough and calloused hands scrape across my skin. Didn't like the way he clumsily tore at my clothes or the smell of mint and cigars on his breath. No shower could make me feel clean. No matter how hard I scrubbed or how scalding hot the water was. I would confide in V, sobbing uncontrollably. I swear I could feel the walls shake with his anger. When I was 16, he met a rather untimely death. I had fallen asleep at a girl's house who I was doing a project with. It was after 6, so all the buses had stopped, which meant I needed to walk home. It took me 2 hours to get back to my apartment, and when I did, there were police vehicles and ambulances surrounding the building. I was curious and confused. As I walked up, the crowd that had begun surrounding the building turned to me. Some of them whispered and pointed in my direction. I didn't know what was happening. As I got closer, An officer tapped me on the shoulder. "Are you Angelica Harding?" I raised my brow but responded quickly. "Yes, why?" He nodded at me, spoke something into the walkie-talkie on his vest, then turned back to me. "Would you please come with me?" It looked like he was trying to keep a cool and calm expression, but there was a look of sympathy and pity in his eyes. I was put in a police vehicle and taken down to the station. They sat me in a room by myself for a while. One person at one point came in and offered me food or a hot chocolate, but I declined it. I needed to know where my dad was before he got really mad at me. After an hour and a half, an officer came in with my aunt, who I hadn't seen since I was 10. She rushed to me and wrapped me in her arms. "Oh, my sweet angel, I'm so sorry this happened." I became even more confused, though. I had an idea of what happened. The officer, my aunt, and I sat down in that room. I was told a call was put in when one of my neighbors heard some loud screaming and banging coming from my apartment. Funny, no one said anything when I screamed, or when the company my dad had over would scream. When the police came in, it appeared everything was fine until they got to my father's bedroom. Blood covered the room, and his dismembered body parts were haphazardly strewn about, except for his head, which hung spinning around the room from the ceiling fan. The police, of course, didn't tell me that. V did. V always tells me the truth. I was still a minor at the time, so if someone from my family didn't take me in, I would be put in the foster care system and sent somewhere else. That thought terrified me more than anything my dad had ever done. That's when my aunt said she'd be adopting me, that she'd love me and take good care of me. The papers were signed and I begged and pleaded with my aunt not to make me move. I just wanted to go home. Well, as it turns out, that worked out perfectly fine. My aunt never actually wanted kids, but she didn't want me to be put through the foster care system either. It was 3 months before I was allowed to go back to my apartment, which was signed over in my aunt's name. The police couldn't find any evidence of a break-in, no DNA, and no person who would have wanted my father dead. I had an alibi, so after some investigations, I was out of the question. The case ran cold and I was allowed to go back home. I lived on my own with V, and my aunt paid all the bills from the comfort of her home in California. I was sent a monthly allowance on top of that for $300 for food and whatever else I needed, but I still got a job to work after school. I would say V and I have become romantically involved. At least as romantically involved as you can with someone you're never allowed to see or touch. Sometimes at night he climbs into my bed and just holds me. I'm not allowed to look at him. Or touch him though, otherwise he says he'll have to leave forever. V protects me. I still have to clean out blood and vomit from my clothes now, but not out of fear this time. I mean, everyone has to eat, right? Even V. His favorite food is truck stop creeps. I've asked him before if he'd ever eat me. He just says, I'm so sweet, all his teeth would rot out. I really wish I could see V, especially now. Something started to feel off a few weeks ago and my period is really late. I can feel something in my stomach growing. I haven't told him yet. I cradle her close to my chest as I lift her little frame from the sofa. It's well past midnight, and I should have done this long ago. It's time to take her to bed. She stirs as I raise her into my arms. Her gentle blue eyes part ever so slowly as she takes in the room and the situation. Hey, honey, time for bed now. Don't worry. Daddy's got you. I bring her in tight so I don't lose my grip on her. I feel her little body relax in my arms as she waffles between wake and sleep. I move tenderly and speak as soft as I can so not to rouse her. As I said, it is well beyond the time to have done this. We've been on the couch watching old movies since 6 when I got home from work. She really liked the classic Disney movies I love. Robin Hood, Winnie the Pooh. She even shed a little tear during Hercules. I think she liked the same movies as me because these old favorites of mine put me at ease. And therefore, put her at ease too. It only makes sense. If her dad's relaxed, so is she. I glanced to the living room before ascending the stairs. It's littered with snack wrappers, popcorn, soda cans, juice boxes, beer cans, and some plates with some fish fingers still on them, half eaten. Tartar sauce glazing over from when I plated it hours ago. She was all ready for our little movie night when I got home, dressed in her little PJs, an oversized t-shirt of mine and her little polka dot pants I don't even remember buying. She practically barraged me with requests as soon as I got home from work. It completely caught me off guard, seeing as she's been so quiet and so dour these last few days. Daddy, can we watch movies tonight? Daddy, can we have fish sticks tonight? Daddy, I want some soda, please. Her energy was so bombastic, I could tell she must have been looking forward for this for some time. After I recovered from that assault of questions, I promised her we'd have a nice night together. I begin making my way upstairs, careful not to wake the little girl. We make it to my room, and I flick the bedside lamp on. Laying down on my pillows, she asks a murmured question. Daddy, can you tell me a bedtime story? Her sudden words startled me a little. I'm sorry, honey. Daddy doesn't have any storybooks in the house. I pull the blankets over her and begin tucking them around her tightly. Please, Daddy, even if it's just made up. I hold her little cheek in my hand, hoping my trembling isn't noticeable. I'm sorry, honey. Daddy has some important grown-up work to do. I can't tonight. I lean in and give her a little kiss on her icy forehead. Just try to get some sleep, baby. Okay. Could you leave the lights on tonight? She rolls over and snuggles into the blankets. Of course, sweetie. I leave the lamp and the little girl and gently close the door. Stealthily, I make my way to the garage. I took some chains and a padlock along with my nail gun. I bolt the door shut. Thankfully, the room has no windows, so I don't have to worry about that. I chain the door to the wall and lock it up tight. She can't get out now. I scramble breathlessly into my car. The stove should be filling the house with gas right now. I crank the engine. The candle I left at the door will only buy me a few minutes. The car roars out of the driveway and I'm well down the boulevard before I see it. An orange flash behind me, well into the horizon. I made it. She can't follow me now. Please don't judge me too harshly. You don't understand. You can't understand. It's been going on for days now, silently watching from every corner of my vision. This might be the only way to escape. I laugh like a madman. I think I got away. I'm practically raving in my car by the time I get on the highway. Then we pass the first lamppost. I dare not look into the passenger seat. I can see her little figure there. Only now it looks like it did before. Blackened and muddy. My heart is in my throat. My car is roaring down the freeway. Daddy? Please don't judge me. Why did you do that? You don't understand. Where are we going? You can't understand. Are we going somewhere fun? I turn the wheel toward the guardrail. I don't have a daughter. For the past month, I've been working at this new place downtown. I sit at a desk all day and enter numbers into an Excel spreadsheet. It is mind-numbing, repetitive, and antisocial. I love it. I have a spacious cubicle, my own computer, and a chair with a lumbar support. Best of all is the lax working environment. As long as you met your quota each day, management takes a hands-off approach. However, there is one rule they rigorously enforce. At the beginning of each day, every employee is required to gather in the boardroom and eat a popsicle. They offer a simple spread of cherry, grape, and mango. For the diabetic staff members, they have sugar-free alternatives. They taste and feel like normal popsicles, but every time I peel back the wrapper and take the first lick, I feel at my core that something is intrinsically wrong about the whole thing. I don't want it to sound as though I don't like popsicles. I think they are fantastic. They taste good, are super refreshing, and take about 5 minutes to consume. At first, I felt uncomfortable standing in a cramped boardroom with about 24 other people and eating a frozen treat. After a couple weeks, I got used to it. But I still could not shake the feeling that it was an incredibly eccentric workplace policy to make popsicle eating a mandatory part of the job. The only time I really interacted with my manager was during the daily popsicle meetings. He always ensured I had my name checked off on the sign-in sheet. He collected our wrappers in an outstretched garbage bag. This has been the routine every single morning since I started. Until yesterday. I was running late and I missed the popsicle meeting. I was hoping that if I snuck in, I could avoid an awkward interrogation by the manager. I darted out of the elevator as soon as it opened, and I ducked my head down so no one would see me enter. Ahead of me, the office was filled with the chaotic milling of over a dozen unfamiliar men. They all wore red doctor scrubs and had surgical masks that obscured their faces. I watched bewildered as they walked in and out of my coworkers' cubicles, dragging behind them trays of unfamiliar equipment. I heard them mumble to each other in an Eastern European language I could not understand. I advanced slowly towards my desk, keeping an eye on the intruders. I glanced into the nearby cubicles. I noticed that none of my coworkers seemed to pay these red-clothed men any attention at all. Completely oblivious, they continued tapping away on their keyboards. I arrived at my cubicle and found that one of the strange men awaited me. He was on his knees tinkering with arcane-looking tools. Sprouting in front of him was something that resembled a waist-high red mushroom. I saw copper piping stick out of this strange fungus and snake its way into the back of my computer seat. "What the hell is that thing?" I asked. I saw the man in red suddenly bolt alert. He stopped what he was doing and whispered something into his wrist. 5 seconds later, my manager leans into my cubicle. He has a raging grin and holds a wrapped popsicle in his hand. "Hey, guy. We missed you this morning, but don't you worry, I put one aside for when you came in." He passed it to me and waited expectantly. "Thanks," I said, removing the wrapper and placing the frozen tip to my tongue. "No problem." He watched me lick the popsicle down to the stick before shooting me a pair of finger guns and retreating back to his office. I turned around to examine the weird mushroom behind me. It was gone, along with the man in the red scrubs. I stood up and scanned the office. All the strangers and all their curious pieces of equipment had vanished. I sat back down onto my computer chair to collect myself. There was no way that all those men could evacuate the office so quickly, especially not with all their tools. I must be going crazy. I loaded up Excel and went to work. I didn't see the men in red scrubs or the odd mushrooms for the rest of the day. Throughout the day, I could not escape the feeling that I'd discovered some forbidden secret. I kept returning to one revelation. All the strangeness disappeared the moment I licked the popsicle. Could there be a connection? Maybe there's some medicinal ingredient in the popsicles that's messing with my brain chemistry. But why would my employer do that? I came up with a few possible explanations. First, maybe the company is drugging us with performance-enhancing drugs to improve productivity, sort of like fighter pilots. Since I missed my morning dosage, maybe I was experiencing the symptoms of withdrawal. In that case, the men in red and the giant mushroom were nothing but a visual hallucination. But I never saw anything like that on my popsicle-free weekends, so there goes that theory. Another option was that Excel was warping my brain. The men in the red scrubs then would be an expression of neurological damage. The best explanation was that maybe the popsicles prevented me from seeing things. Instead of blocking out pain, they inhibited the brain's ability to process certain images. That would mean that the strangers have always been there, lurking invisibly all around us. I haven't seen them until today, because I've been consistent with my morning licks. No matter the explanation, I vowed I would never eat another popsicle. Unfortunately, that put me in a major dilemma. My job depended on my consumption of the frozen snack. Despite its eccentricities, I really wanted to keep the job. I needed a strategy that I could put past the scrutiny of my manager. So I devised a plan. Just before the popsicle meeting, I would store an unwrapped condom in my cheek. When the time came to consume the popsicle, I would use the condom to act as a barrier between the frozen treat and my mouth. That way, the poison my employer was supplying would not enter my system. Additionally, I would keep a plastic bag in the collar of my shirt that would allow me to spit out the excess liquid. This morning, I tried out my plan. The manager smiled at me and nodded as I entered the boardroom. I already had the condom in my mouth. I picked up a cherry-flavored popsicle and retreated to my corner. This was the moment of truth. I unwrapped the popsicle, tongued my mouth condom into position, and slowly slid the frozen treat into the rubber sheath. And I started choking uncontrollably. Part of the condom dipped past the back of my throat, triggering my highly sensitive gag reflex. I realized too late that I should have taken this weakness into consideration before enacting this plan. Everyone in the boardroom stared at the spectacle. I coughed so hard my eyes watered. I gave up and noisily regurgitated the condom-wrapped popsicle into my hands. Absolute silence followed. I felt someone behind me breathe heavily into my ear. I knew it was one of the men in the red scrubs. I turned around, and no one was there. Moments later, the manager took me to his office. The HR rep followed shortly after. They terminated my employment. Apparently, since I was still in my probationary period, they had no problem releasing me. It seems they got the impression that I have a perverse sense of humor. They said my behavior was unbecoming in a professional environment. They said the popsicle meetings were meant to be a cheap and effective way to engender office-wide camaraderie. They emphasized it was not an opportunity for a badly timed fellatio joke. I mentioned the men in red, and the tubes, and the mushrooms. My manager then said, "They aren't really a problem as long as you eat your popsicles." Thank you for coming in, Miss Warren. I promise I'll try to make this quick. Are you okay with me recording this? It is just for my notes. It's easier. No problem. He cleared his throat. Okay, let's get started. Your father believed there were shadows after him? This is all being detailed in the files you have. I don't really see the point in going over what you already know. Yes, I have read all the reports, but I still think it would be helpful if I could get it directly from you, in your own words. She sighed and a creak of the chair could be heard. Can I smoke? I know it's horrible, but it helps my nerves. Sorry, it's a no smoking building, but I promise we will make it quick. It really wasn't shadows. Everyone gets that part wrong. Not shadows? You know how some animals can see ultraviolet light or different colors of the spectrum or whatever? He thought it was like that. The monsters were always there. Humans just were unable to see them. They existed on some other spectrum. See? That's helpful. And when did this all begin? After your mother died? How old were you then? I was about to turn 3. Mary was 8, and Kevin had just turned 10 when our mother died. I was too young to really understand. I only knew what my father told us, and he said the monsters had killed her. Killed her and ate her up. But according to the police reports at the time, she was attacked by a mugger while jogging early that morning. She was... Are you okay with me going into detail? Yes, I've now heard it all before. All right. The police report states that according to security cameras and evidence at the scene, they believe while she was jogging that early June morning, she was attacked from behind. He pulled her into the bushes, where he raped her, and mutilated her body before leaving her to bleed out and die. She was discovered that afternoon by a family walking their dog. A few possible suspects were brought in for questioning, but no one was ever charged. I didn't really have a chance to know my mom. I was so young at the time. I only really have fading memories of her, but I think I remember her being very kind and beautiful. I'm so sorry, Miss Warren. She didn't deserve that death. Not that anyone really does. It must have been very difficult for your family. And that's when your father began talking about monsters? I guess so. I never remember him talking about them before that, but again, I was young. Most of my memories of that time are hazy at best. Do you remember much from when you were 3? No. I understand. Just try to share what you know, if you can. I think he tried caring for us the best he was able in that state. I don't think I was aware until much later he had stopped going to work. Stopped sending Mary and Kevin to school. Mary and Kevin pretty much kept things going around the house. They fed me and put me to bed. They were too young for that responsibility. I found out that CPS got involved. We were likely going to be taken away. And that's why he moved you all? I'd assume so. He told us we had to go hide from the monsters. He felt they preferred to congregate in the city around humans, but there were fewer in the natural wild. So he took you to live in the woods? Yeah, we were going camping. It was fun at first. Dad seemed more relaxed. I remember we had marshmallows and hot dogs, and he read to us around the fire until we fell asleep. How was your father, normally? There were good days and bad. He could be an angry and strict man. He wanted us to be safe. He would repeat it daily, almost like a prayer. Only the strong survive. He made us repeat it back. If we were slow or tired or complained of being hungry, he would yell at us. He would threaten to leave us behind and let the monsters eat us. He said Mom was weak, and that's why they got her, and we would be next if we didn't learn to be strong. That's rough. You were just children. Yes, it often was. Maybe harder on Kevin and Mary since they were older and had to adjust more, but they always helped me. If I cried because I was hungry, they would each give me a share of their rations. And Dad wasn't always cruel. I think in the end, he really just wanted to protect us. There were good times too. Fun Dad memories of him laughing and playing with us. It wasn't all that bad. Of course, Can we go over what happened to Kevin? I was 8 then, Mary 13 and Kevin 15. Life had become routine by then, living in the woods, hunting, fishing, moving constantly. Maybe we had just become used to it all. That night, Dad woke us up saying the monsters had found us. We had to run. He wanted us to leave everything and just literally run. Kevin said no. He called Dad crazy and they began shouting back and forth. He said he had enough of all of this and wasn't going to lose all of our belongings because he was a nut job seeing monsters in the shadows. He said the monsters weren't real. Dad called him weak before pushing him hard. Kevin fell and didn't get up. Mary was crying. Dad slapped her and grabbed us and we ran. We left Kevin there. So Kevin didn't believe in the monsters. Did Mary and you? I am not sure what they believed. No one had ever said anything about them not being real before that moment. I was young. My dad said they were real. Why wouldn't I believe him? That's all I had known. A truth presented to me. They teach children about other countries and planets. Things we may have never seen or will ever see, and we believe it, because adults tell us it is so. Is it any different? Yes. I mean, no. It is completely understandable. Of course you would believe and trust your father. We ran for a long time, until morning. Then Dad left us to go check if we had been followed. He never came back. This is when hikers discovered Kevin's body, and as the rangers could tell, other children had been at the campsite. They began a search and found you and Mary 2 days later. You both were in very bad shape. Yes, yeah. You already know Mary was sick and died later in the hospital. We hadn't moved from the spot Dad had left us. We hadn't brought anything with us, and we're just wearing nightshirts. It was cold, and we were so hungry and thirsty. But we were afraid. We didn't know where the monsters were, or where Dad or Kevin were, so we sat crying until the rescuers had found us. I'm truly sorry, Miss Warren. They never found your father. No, they haven't. He is strong, though. They said he had killed Kevin, that he had been stabbed multiple times. That's what they said. That's what they said. After your lengthy hospital stay, you were adopted by a cousin of your mother's, right? Yes. Caitlin was very kind. She and her husband had 3 daughters, and they accepted me fully as part of the family. Good. I'm glad you had them. I just have one more question, if you don't mind. Yes? Did your father say he could see the monsters? Nothing in any of the reports said anything about it. The strong can see them. They look like pure nightmare. That's what you really want to know, right? Of course, you can't see them, but you don't believe, do you? It is beyond words. They are not light or shadows or solid matter or gas. They are nothing you can even begin to imagine. You perhaps sense movement out of the corner of your eye, and look, but nothing is there. They just are a wisp of your mind, just watching and waiting. But you don't need to see them. You can feel them right behind your shoulder. If they have a breath, it would be hot on the back of your neck, and you feel your skin react. Goosebumps and your hair stands on end. That feeling in the pit of your stomach flexes and cries out for you to run because they are watching and you are not strong. You are not strong enough to survive. The tape ends with screaming, nearly 10 full minutes of screaming. They found Evan dead in the small office he kept. I've seen the crime scene photos, and nothing could prepare me for that horror. So much blood. Somehow he still sat in his chair. No restraints were used. a pencil stuck through his right eye, his heart torn out and sitting in the middle of the table next to the small recorder. I felt the pangs of guilt, as while the story had been his idea, I encouraged him to follow it and even reach out to Miss Warren when she had declined all the other interviews. I wasn't sure why she had said yes to Evan. He told me that her case wasn't unique and that there were others too. His notes were all missing. I never got the details. Evan was a good writer, and I trusted his gut to find a good story. The police believe Miss Warren is guilty of doing this, though they can't find her. I guess the crime scene was remarkably clean and there was no trace of another person. Like no blood splatter spots that showed someone else there. He had cameras outside his office. They showed only her enter and leave. She seemed to leave far too quickly to have committed the murder and cleaned up. She also had no blood on her when she left. It is strange for sure, yet the police are not interested in looking for anyone else. Not that I believe a light monster did this. The police believe that Miss Warren was as troubled as her father, and Evan going into detail about her mother and siblings may have just triggered her. Apparently recently her adopted family had tragedy as well. A drunk driver hit their car, and her husband and kids were killed. Months later, Caitlin committed suicide. These events likely fed into her fear of monsters causing death of her family members. Maybe this was why she accepted the interview after all this time. I'm not sure what this poor girl went through, but I can't help but feel a chill when I think I see something out of the corner of my eye.